Hey cyclists, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are doing another album review, and this time I decided to go with an album that was a little less mainstream. Today we are going to be reviewing Life on Earth by Hurray for the Riff Raff. It just released February 18th of 2022 this year, so I figured it would be the perfect time to go over it and give you my thoughts on the songs as well as an album as a whole. So let's get started. Alright, so the song has 11 tracks total, and the first one is called Wolves. It talks about the protagonist running away because there are wolves attacking their home, and it has a lot of interesting choices in terms of musicality. They have a big bass drum that's constantly keeping time in the beat and everything, and there's a primary vocal and a backing vocal track. And in each of the vocal parts, singer is emphasizing a breath on opposite beats, which I think gives it a really cool effect because it makes you feel like you're running. And this song, there's a lot of references to running. I think she says it about like 3 or 4 times in the song. So it totally fits with the, out of breath and sort of like dangerous nature you're supposed to feel with the song. So the next song on the track is called Pierced Arrows. It actually released a couple of months ago as a promo for the album, and it has its own music video on YouTube, so I highly recommend checking it out because it's really cool. Things that I loved about the song is that it references running again, so it ties back to a lot of the themes from the first song. And another thing is that it makes you feel like you as the protagonist are in danger. So it's really, these two first songs are really highlighting like the danger of life on Earth and like the danger that nature can present to, humanity, which I think is interesting thematic wise. But in terms of musicality, it definitely has a very like, not as much of a synth vibe, but it definitely has a chill vibe, but it feels danceable as well. It almost, I think the best way to describe it is it kind of sounds like a song you would hear at the end of like an 80s like movie, like a teen movie or whatever. Like it has that very like nostalgic and like upbeat feel, but also talks about really dangerous and vulnerable themes in the song, which I think was really cool. Also, this song and the previous song sort of have hints of like bass guitar, and I thought in this song in particular the bass was super catchy. Okay, so the third track on the album is called Pointed at the Sun, and one of the things I didn't mention, I don't think, or highlighted well enough in the first 2 songs is that the danger from nature in the first 2 songs are coming from the animals around them, like flora and fauna, basically, the dangers of that. But this song sort of gets into more, I think, ethereal threats to humanity. So it talks about, like, obviously it's called Point at the Sun, so it talks about, the danger of the sun. It talks about astrological signs, about hurricanes, about religion. There are 2 separate mentions of religion and especially Jesus in the song, which I find to be interesting, just in terms of like the idea of nature and like how that relates to like, ethereal, ideas of the universe and stuff like that. So yeah, I really liked the theme of the song. It had a very similar bass timbre to the previous song, which I said I enjoyed a lot in the second song, and I enjoyed here too. So I like that it gives it like cohesion. And this is the 3rd song in a row that I noticed that there was a mention of running, and they talked about walking and running in this song. So the next song on our list is Rhodadrone, which is a type of flower, if you didn't know, that is found a lot in like Southeast Asia and parts of the United States. Specifically, the songwriter was inspired by the flowers that they found in New Orleans, which is where the band originally formed, which I think is a really nice touch, just in terms of like the lore and everything for the band. I think it's a really cool feature. This song in particular I thought was really interesting because I think throughout it there's these 2 different sections going on and sort of like intermingling with each other. So the singer is talking about the beauty of flora and like all of the beautiful flowers and like in nature, specifically like the plants and the trees and everything, and then talking about a relationship that didn't work out, specifically about like the violence and the loneliness that can bring. And I think that it's really interesting to combat those 2, especially because at the end of the song she repeats this line about 4 or 5 times where she says, and I don't know what it'll take to carry on, which I think is interesting because it can be interpreted in 2 different ways. On the one hand, on the surface level, it's just like, I don't know what I can do to even move on, like I don't know the next steps, or like that. But thinking about the themes of the song, I think that it could also be interpreted as like, look at all of the beauty in the world, like if this can't help me move on from this tragedy, like what will, you know what I mean? Like, so like specifically referencing the flowers and like the beauty they've been talking about in that one theme, which I think is a really, really cool touch by the songwriter. And I just really enjoyed the song. The melody in particular, I think, and we'll get into that more at the end with the full album review, but the melody in this song in particular I really enjoyed. I don't know whether it was just because it was unexpected for me, like I thought that it was like a cool change or not, but I really enjoyed it. So number 5 is called Jupiter's Dance, and I think this sort of goes into what I was talking about in the previous song, where the melody, especially in this song too, I think served wonders for the themes of the song. So it starts out, the beginning of the phrase starts out major and then switches to minor at the end and has a drop in pitch, which I think is a really cool effect because it gives like each of the phrases that are having this melody line in it feel like a roller coaster of emotions, which I'm pretty sure this song is about, you know, losing somebody. So I think that that accurately reflects that feeling. The whole song is talking about like the difference between home and what that means versus like the vastness of space. And she uses that metaphor with all of the different like ethereal references like Jupiter and the moon and all of those things to talk about like no matter how vast the universe is, like I will always be your home, which I think is a really cool message and a really cool way to describe that message. I just loved this song in general, so yeah. All right, number 6 is the song that the album is named off of. It's called Life on Earth, and it is the longest song on the album. It's right away struck me as feeling like a completely drastic change because the opening of it starts out with piano, which is an instrument we haven't heard before in the album yet, and later on we'll hear more oboe and horn sections coming through compared to the more stringed instruments that happen to be in the first couple songs. Throughout the song, she keeps repeating the phrase, life on earth is long, which I think is an interesting sentiment because, you know, everybody always says like life is so short, but I like that this song is focusing on the sort of good things in life, telling you that you should be focused on instead of worrying about it, and showing like, especially with humans versus nature, that thematic idea, how our life is the longest life on earth so far, you know, like compared to most animals. And so, you know, it's talking about not to take life for granted, and I think that's just really cool. There's also in this particular song references to the past song, Jupiter's Dance, where they talk about galaxies and about spirits, and so I just think that that's really nice. It makes it feel really cohesive. It's referencing the previous song, which is always a very, you know, subtle but great way to have the whole album feel very whole. All right, number 7 on the track is called Night Queen, and one of the things that I had failed to mention previously throughout this is that all the songs up to this point and after this for the most part have all had their titles been in caps, like all caps. However, this song chooses to be in lowercase, which I think is interesting. And in an interview that I'll link in the description below, the songwriter states that this song, more than any other song, felt like they were sort of traveling to a different world or a different universe. So they wanted to show that not only in their musicality, but also in the way that the song title was presented with the rest of the album, which I think is a really cool technique that I haven't seen done very often before, where they just have one specific song and the song that's the title of the album isn't even named after be completely different. So that cued me in right away that this is going to be an important song. Another thing that they do at the very end is, and this is a pattern in a lot of the songs, but I think it's done really well here too, is that they repeat the last line of the song over and over again a couple times at the end, which not only serves as like to mellow out your listener and let them fade away, but also to highlight the importance of that specific line in terms of the theme of the song and the album, which I think was a really nice touch. The last thing I'll say about this song is that they have a really cool reference to wolves, which is the first song in the album, which I find interesting because after, you know, the song that the album's titled off of, you can sort of think of this as like a reset in terms of what the rest of the songs are going to look like. And so they sort of reference the very first song again in the album by talking about how they were part of a pack, they left that pack and they loved freedom because they loved the freedom and now they regret it a little bit, which, you know, the pack reference to the wolves sort of makes it seem like the dangers that were so present and external in the first couple of songs are now turning internal, and that danger is coming from the protagonist or the narrator instead of externally, which I think is an interesting concept that they get into later in the album. All right, number 8 in the album is called Precious Cargo, and I sort of wouldn't really classify this as a song. It feels more like a spoken poem over music and with a backing track harmony. It is really heavy, so I would honestly put a trigger warning if talking about racial and immigrant injustice is triggering for you. It talks about that process through the perspective of an immigrant child who's trying to get to the United States and who's been separated from their family, who's had to go under harsh conditions and been treated poorly by the officers. And I think this sort of goes into what the whole album's theme is about in terms of this section of the album being talking about the dangers of humans rather than specifically the dangers of nature in general to humans, the nature and the danger of humans to human interaction, which I think is a really interesting concept, and it's explored really well and I think maturely and professionally in this song. And then it ends with a dialogue from, I believe, a actual immigrant who has crossed over and has dealt with the ICE before. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think it's just a really well done song. It's probably my favorite on the album, and I just think that it is really catchy too, musically wise. Like, I mean, it just does a really great job on so many levels, and it definitely felt like it took a lot of time and care and energy to put into the song, so I would highly recommend it. The number 9 is called Rosemary Tears, and I really enjoyed this song. They had some great harmonies with it. Musically, I thought it was really well technically done. It had a really interesting like soft brass band interlude. So not like a big crazy, you know, explosion of brass, but like a very like subdued. It almost felt like a hymn in that way. Which I enjoyed because, again, I think it's a nice tie to New Orleans and where they, you know, all got their start and met and formed a group, which, you know, is jazz and like hymn and blues is very popular and started in New Orleans. So I think that's a great reference to that. I also like the idea, again, they go back to the idea of Flora. It talks about, from the narrator's perspective, like crying rosemary tears and having their, I guess, antagonist feature in the song talking about rosary on their cheeks. So it's two different types of flora, and how those like oppose but also relate to each other is really interesting. So yeah, I think another like really well-rounded song. Number 10, we have Saga, which is the final song that has lyrics in this album. It mostly focuses on the idea of legacy, the idea of not wanting your particular feeling of loneliness that like in the present to be what is defining you throughout the rest of your life and be your legacy and your saga, which I think is a really interesting topic to leave on, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. It talks about their struggle with the human connection and about how, again, referencing with the previous song, how the freedom that they so long desired like will fade away in time, and that feeling for it will fade with time. And mostly just leave you lonely, which I think is an interesting concept. And I love that the song also uses a bunch of different instrumentation. They introduced the xylophone with it. And yeah, I just thought it was a really well done song. It's probably not my favorite compared to some of the other songs on the list. I think it did sound a little bit more, I guess, expected in terms of melody, but I understand, like, especially when you have multiple songs in a row that are like, you know, outdoing themselves in terms of the musicality. I understand that each song can't be perfect in that, but I enjoyed it still as it was, and yeah, I would recommend it. The final song on the album is called Kin, and this was why I made an exception when we were talking about Night Queen, because this song has a lowercase I, and I sort of think of it as like almost a transition out of this like universe that we've been dealing with in this album. So it's a transition out and to close the album for the listener, and it is entirely instrumental. It's a 51-second track, and it sounds a lot like wind chimes that are going out, or like, you know, soft xylophone in a way. Which I really enjoy because I think it gives it sort of like this peaceful air that the narrator has been searching for throughout this album, which I really enjoy. So going into this, I probably would have never heard of or listened to their album if it weren't for this video. The fact that I did stumble upon their album, I feel so lucky for, because I really enjoy their music. It's not the normal music that I would probably choose or listen to, but I think that it was really, really fun. And I think that they had so many fun ideas and concepts in terms of themes, in terms of melody writing, and just in terms of instrumentation in general. I think that they are so clever when it comes to their instrumentation. And there were so many details that I left out in this video for time's sake, but that I think you should discover on your own. I would definitely recommend going to support them, especially since their album just released and they don't have as much mainstream following as some of the more well-known albums. So I would definitely recommend going to support their music. You will not regret it. In terms of a rating for the album, I would probably give it an 8 out of 10. I kind of wish it was a little longer. They only had like 11 tracks and one of them was like less than a minute, but I really enjoyed their music and I can't wait to see what they do next. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see me do more album reviews, there are a couple of ways you can support me. You could leave a comment telling me what your favorite song on this album was if you listened to it. You can like the video, you can share the video, you can put the notification bells, you could subscribe, or you could follow me on Instagram at songcycle_official. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.